So, hello everyone, and thanks for coming to this webinar about the importance of letters of critical review. And I'm John Fulton, work in the grants office, and letters of critical review are something that I like to talk about quite a bit. But so just pointing out that these webinars are something that the grants office and local history services do once a month. We always do them on the third Thursday of the month. And if you've got questions, you can put them in the chat, and we'll try to get to them at the end. And it's possible that any other staff members might try to answer you through the chat if it's something that's easy to answer. And then once I get done with the presentation, we can, you can unmute yourself and ask questions verbally if you'd like. All right. So the rough agenda for today is, we're just going to talk about what the letters of critical review are and what they're not, and we're going to talk about. I'm going to talk about why we, the reviewers, need these letters, and then talk about why you need them, and then say a little bit about how you could get them and where you can get them, because that's not always that clear. We consistently get questions about the letters of critical review, and it's one reason we're doing this. They are a required document when somebody is trying to do implementation of an interpretive project. And so, there might be other categories that might need a letter of critical review, but in general, the type of projects that need them are going to be exhibits. They're going to be film projects, going to be publications. Some of the historical signage would need them, but that's kind of a different case. I won't talk about them so much today. And then, of course, web content. If it's new content, if it's based on research, if it's interpreting anything, we would also ask for letters of critical review in those cases. And so your situation is that you've done one of these things. You've developed an exhibit. You've written a manuscript. You've gotten to the point with a film project that you've got a script, and you're ready to move on, and you want to finish whatever it is. You want to publish your book. You actually want to construct your exhibit, and you want to finish your film and get it out there in front of people. And so the letter of critical review is helping you apply to us to get that implementation funding. And so they're two reviews that are done by independent reviewers, so people who are not ideally at your organization, but for sure are not part of your project already. So that leaves a lot of people usually who could write these letters. But if it's somebody who has an interest in the work getting done, and certainly if it's someone who might apply to do some of the finishing work, we wouldn't want them writing these letters. And then once you have the letters, you're going to attach them to the application along with the draft of exhibit tags, to script, manuscript, and that'll be an important part of that request that you're putting into us to get those funds. And again, just here's some visuals of what somebody's trying to do here. So this is in the upper left corner is just a a very, very small part of a film script that I pulled out here. And, the person is trying to turn the script into an actual video that, in this case would be on YouTube. So that's, you're going from that, almost finished stage to the finished stage. Okay, but, so what is this letter of critical review? In general, what we're talking about is peer review. And that's something that, is very common in academic settings. But as I'll say here, and I'll try to say it again, we don't require that an academic write your letter of critical review. Of course, they're a great source, and they often understand the process quite well, and so they can be easier to approach, and when you're trying to convince them to do this for you, but the as you all know, the field, the history field is much broader than what's going on in colleges or universities, and so this is going to obviously include people who are going to be in museums, people who are at county historical societies, and then depending on what it is you're trying to do, like say you're trying to get a film done, uh, you'd probably still want at least one of your critical reviewers to be a historian, but or at least someone who knows the history that you're looking at in detail, so that they can comment on it. But you might end up looking at someone who's done documentaries and might not be a historian necessarily, but they have done that sort of work. And again, this, the basic reason that we want the letters is that, we want someone to check for historical accuracy, and then if it's, if the method that you're using, could use some feedback, someone who knows how you're doing your history. And many letters of critical review, they will comment on the history and the project, but a lot of them end up talking about, the style of what you're doing, especially in manuscripts. You get a lot of feedback on, this section could use X or Y changes to it to make it a little more readable. And this is just an example. This is a few paragraphs pulled out of a letter of critical review, and they're talking about an exhibit here on women's suffrage, and I think what they're doing here is really good. Obviously I'm going to leave it behind in just a second, and so you won't get to read it in detail. But they're looking at how the exhibit script and panel placement is working together, and they're making really specific recommendations based on what they're seeing in the text that you gave them to look at. And again, that's what we want. And so, what the letters aren't is, first and foremost, they are not letters of support. There's nothing wrong with projects getting letters of support, and obviously all the support you can get is always helpful. But in this case, with the letters of critical review, if you have somebody who's just trying to tell us this is a great idea, and boy, I support them doing it, and and they don't really want to get into the whichever text you're showing them, they don't really want to touch that part of it. if they're not addressing the content of what it is you're going to be showing us to try to get funded to finish, then they're not doing you any favors. And actually, one thing they're doing is if they write you a letter of critical review that's just very supportive and doesn't really have any comments for you that for you to consider about changing your text. They aren't. I mean, and to us, they're not taking your project seriously. They're just saying, this is great. Something should be done. This person's doing it. That's great. And I hope they go do that. And I hope you give them some money. So what I'm getting at is that's not very helpful. If you get those letters of support, don't upload them to the application. It's just going to take some review time away from everything else that we're looking at. So try to avoid those. And I know it's maybe not that helpful to hear this because sometimes you ask for a letter of critical review and what you get is a letter of support, and again that's fine, and but if that happens, then unfortunately that puts a burden on you of finding somebody else to maybe give you some critique, and or you might have to go back to the same person and say that this isn't what you were looking for. So letters of critical review are very, very helpful for us doing our reviews. So the reviewer who's looking at an exhibit, reviewer who's looking at a book project, we get reviewers for small projects. Reviewers get about a week and a half to do our reviews, and if we get say of 3 book projects, 3 manuscripts come in the same round, we're not really going to be able to read what could be 900 pages in a week and a half. And the other issue is, we even though we may know quite a bit of history, we may not know that specific set of events, or the specific history that happened that's being discussed. We may not be experts in any way about that history, and so what we say about it, may or may not help you to get funded. And so when you've got that critical review from somebody who knows the history and or understands how you're approaching it and what you're trying to do, their expertise is going to help us to understand what it is you're doing, and and help us to know that there is accuracy, or in some cases lack of accuracy in what that project is trying to accomplish. And so in that sense, it's incredibly helpful for us to get it right, to understand the history that we may or may not be that familiar with. And then, so letters of critical review saying they enable better interpretation. And so thinking about how they're helping you as an applicant and as a grantee, when you get feedback, when you get someone who is well versed in the history that you're looking at, or someone who knows the methodology, has a lot of experience with it, when you get that opportunity for someone like that to look at your project in some detail, and to give you some real, hopefully critical feedback, that's actually kind of rare. I mean, this, if you're writing something, it can be a bit of a lonely process, and especially if you have a long research process that you went through. Um, there's so many things you may have looked at that, getting that expert or experienced voice to give you some feedback can be really, really helpful, and it can help you get where you want to be with your project when you are finishing it. And so, I think all the staff would agree that the letters, they're not just a box to be checked off, although it may end up that way, depending on when you get your letter. Uh, but they're not just a hoop to be jumped through. They're a really valuable resource that you can have to work with, and 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 they can also help you uh, to strengthen your application. Your application is making an argument that whatever it is you're doing is valuable, and the funding that we're going to give you to finish it is is crucial to getting this history out there. And so you can use those letters to bolster your argument, and um, and you can make your application more competitive when you tell us how you are addressing this feedback that you got. It can help you quite a bit. All right, so just the steps involved with these um, with getting these letters is, you need to ask some people who aren't with your project already, and of course, it's a fairly tight community of historians in the state, so you may know them already, and already had conversations with them. But again, if you want them to be somebody who's not going to benefit directly from any of the funding you might get. Um, but so again, you might look at people in colleges, uh, teachers or instructors, but it can be high school social studies people. It can just be, it can be independent historians who really know the subject. And again, if you're working on an exhibit project, someone who's done, uh, a number of exhibits might be a good reviewer. Um, and then so, you know, once you've convinced them to do this for you, you send them your manuscript, your text, your script, um, and then they read it, and will compose the letters. They send those letters back to you, so you're the one who is going to get them, and then you will attach that to the application along with the text that they looked at. Um, and then again, that's it's a very important part of getting those finishing funds for that interpretive project. And so the question some people get, or some people have, is how do I find, if you don't know someone already, it's like, how do I find someone who's going to do something like this? And there's not an easy answer to that, but we do have the preservation specialist directory. um, as Todd Mahan has said, it can be a little light on historians, but it is a good place to start. And um, a quick search I did on historical researchers came up with 71 records. It doesn't mean that's 71 people who would definitely be able to give you a review, because whatever they specialize in may not be what you're working on. But it is one place to start. Um, and obviously, I mean, you can quiz staff about this. And some of the people in local history services might be able to help you, but certainly some of us in the grants office are happy to make suggestions. But again, we may not actually know the particular history that well, so we might not know, but we can definitely help think it through. And there is the problem of getting them before your deadline, and so like with with so many things with your application, it's always good to get started on this uh, as early as you can when you think of it, because um, if you're somebody's doing you a favor, even if you're going to set it up so that they might get a stipend for doing the work in an earlier phase. Um, it's still uh, it's a good thing not to request these things at the last minute, and put a burden on somebody who would want to help you, but then all of a sudden they've got what seems like last minute homework to do. So that's something to definitely think about. Um, and again, you're asking people for these. You're not writing them yourself, so you need to tell them. Once you find somebody who's willing to do it, you need to tell them, what they need to do. Uh, they you could send them our direction, and we would tell them what they need to do. But in my experience, that's very few letter writers ever contact us. They just jump in and do the work. Um, so what is it they do need to do if they're going to write this letter of critical review? And it's always good for them to start with a brief introduction that talks about their experience and just quickly explains why they have some standing to look at this text and comment it in a useful way. And then they do need to talk about the text in some depth. Um, and obviously they would be making observations about things that work or things that could work better. And hopefully they're going to make some helpful suggestions on changes you could make. And we don't really expect them to write more than a page or two. Um, some uh, some useful letters are longer than that, and some useful letters are quite brief. But I always get concerned when I see like a 3-paragraph letter, because a lot of times they are just they're just encouraging us to fund something, but not really telling us much about what they saw. Um, so again, these letters are, their evaluation of professional work, uh, uh, by others who are working in the same field. Um, and then, so some of the questions they might use to look at the text is, I mean, here they are. Is it making a contribution? Is it presenting good research? Is it discussing best practices? Is it well written, or are there organizational issues that could be improved, or so forth? So that's it's uh, we're not we're not asking you to ask them to you know to write an essay about your text. We just are trying to get that helpful feedback for our review, and to get that helpful feedback that's going to give you some perspective on your project. And here we are. So if anybody has questions, I can't see the chat at the moment, but
I can watch the chat, John.
Oh, thanks. Yep. Is there anything in there now?
There is not.
And does anybody have verbal questions at this point? All right.
Maureen would like to know what a reasonable stipend would be.
So that's a great question. Usually something around $200 or $300 is not uncommon. Again, the stipend is something that if you wanted to pay someone to write these letters, you have to plan to get them to write those letters during the grant period of your second to last phase. So say your last writing phase that is is coming up with all the plans and the text for the exhibit. When you apply to us to get that phase, you could include those stipends for the letter writers. But and obviously, Maureen, you're already thinking ahead, and that's great. It's it can be a challenge to think that far ahead that that you're going to need these letters when you apply for the final stage, but to get the funds, you'll have to pay these writers. You'd have to request them at when you apply for that second to last phase. So so it is possible to do that if you do it in an early enough phase. Yeah.
Okay, Todd wanted to add something, but then you covered it, so bully for you, John.
Yeah. Do you want to? What did he want to cover?
He did not say, but
gotcha.
I have a question from Michael Peterson.
I just wanted to add about using the in previous phases to actually add it as a budget line item.
Yes.
If you're doing the writing. So I think that's a great way to do it. Anyway, so on to Michael Peterson's question.
Yes. Michael asks, are letters of critical review something that is generally required to apply for a grant at most nonprofit organizations, or is this something specific at MNHS?
So you're asking is it something required for other grants besides ours?
Correct. Yeah, or specific to our program.
I know that it's definitely used out there. Foundations, I don't know. They definitely come at funding a lot in a much different way than we do. But I know for some federal grants in the humanities, you're going to have to produce something like that at some point. But don't worry about those other grants. You're in Minnesota. Hopefully this is where you're playing. But my short answer is, I'm really not sure. It depends on the program.
Okay, Michael, I hope that helped. Maureen.
me too.
Maureen has some follow-up questions.
Great.
Michael said yes, so awesome. Okay, Maureen, do we have to show how we change the text after the reviews, or do we submit the draft the reviewers read? So
yes.
Looking ahead.
Second. Yeah. So so say you're trying to do a book, and in your final writing phase, the final product of that is going to be your book manuscript. So not the finished book itself, but the manuscript that'll be used by a publisher to print it. And so that's going to be what you end up with. You have you've engaged a couple of reviewers to look at this, so they're going to be looking at it near the end. I assume that if you're putting a manuscript together, you're probably going to want to keep working on it right up to the end. And so they're going to look at it near the end of that, near the end of the project. And so they're going to see that version, and then when you're applying for funds to publish it, you do want to give us the text that they're responding to. And it's possible you might have cleaned it up a little bit, but if it's changed significantly, then you would want to get new letters of review, because yes, as you put it, you do want to give us the text that the reviewers responded to. I guess one thing I'd add is that some of the exhibit reviewers and I and some of the staff, we are interested in, adding either some more information in the manual about the letters of critical review to try and answer these questions, in black and white in a findable place. It could end up being some sort of tip sheet or something like that, but that is something that's on our list of things to get to, is try to improve some of this information about letters of critical review. So I can't see my clock. Could someone say what time it is?
It is 2:37. Maureen has one comment. I'll read out. Excuse me. In the past, we found we did not agree with one point the reviewer made, and so did not change it.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, we don't require, we actually don't require at this point any response to the letters. But as I put it before, if you do respond to the letters, it's going to help us to, to think about your project as you see it. So yeah. So if they say 3 things about say your manuscript, and you agree with 2 of them and you disagree with the other one, you could just tell us that. You could just say, well, we do plan to make certain changes based on what we agree with, but we think they misunderstood what we were doing, and so we don't plan to change anything based on their last point. And that's fine. And especially if you're writing that out to us in the application, or possibly in a attached response to the letters, that's great. It's still going to help you even if you don't agree with absolutely everything they say.
Hey, this is Todd, and I'm Todd Mahan. I'm the State History Services Manager, so I'm a content reviewer. And as John reviews a lot of the film projects, I review a lot of the museum exhibit interpretation projects and historical markers and things like that. And so I like what John said, and the advice I usually give to people on that sort of piece of, if there's something in the critical review letter that you disagree with, I generally, and this isn't a requirement, but it's one of those things that I think helps us as reviewers and also helps the applicant make use of the letters, is suggest to them that they provide in the application, usually as another attachment, a document that kind of summarizes what's in those 2 letters, and then kind of make like a table, and then sort of say if and how the final text is affected by those comments. And so you might get in a letter that says, you've got the wrong date here. It's not 1937, it's 1947. And so you could respond to that and say, okay, great, thanks. We'll make the change. Thanks for pointing that out. Or you might say, well, our information says it's this, so we're going to stick with that. Now, that's a factual thing, so that's a little bit clearer. Oftentimes, letters of critical review will sort of talk about what's not included in there. They might want to sort of have additional sort of features to the story to broaden it out, or maybe addressing inclusion. And those things should be definitely taken into consideration. But you might be working off of an interpretive plan where you've got some identified themes, and you might sort of say, this is an exhibit about button collecting in Acme County, and so the suggestion to talk about the industrialization of button making in China is not what we want to cover here. Those are really terrible examples. But so then you can just sort of say, yes, we agree with that, or here's why we don't, because it doesn't fit with what we're trying to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks for that. And Melinda, thanks for the help. I guess we'll call it a webinar, and see you all next time.